A West Coast Battle of the Birds. Week 4 begins with a Thursday night showdown between the Seattle Seahawks and the Arizona Cardinals. Both of these teams are looking to bounce back this year after failing to make the playoffs last year. Can Sam Darnold spread his wings in Seattle, or will the Cards' defense send him crashing back to the basement? We'll see in the simulation, but first, let's get behind the bar and make our drink a red Gyarados. Alright, week 4 of the Sips and Simulation season. My lighting, new. Our teams this week, new. Everything else about my scuffed ass setup, same as always. First of 4 primetime games for Seattle. Sorry, Cards, y'all only get 2 this season. Now I have to admit, despite being an East Coast boy through and through, I do love Seattle. I've got some family out there. I was lucky enough to get to travel regularly there for work for a little while. It's just an incredible city with great vibes. For this week's drink, however, Seattle's contribution is not any of the lovely cocktails you might find in that city's bars, but instead a nod to the neighborhood just across the tracks from Lumen Field. That's right, for Seattle this week, we are paying homage to their Chinatown and my grocery store goat Wajimaya with Shochu and Baijiu. So when I was first coming up with this drink, I was originally just going to be doing the Wajimaya angle with either a bottle of Shochu or sake as this drink's representative. However, when I was writing the script, I remembered that I had a bottle of Baijiu from when I first planned on doing this show back in 2024. Now, in case you're unfamiliar, Baijiu is a Chinese liqueur typically distilled from fermented sorghum, whereas Shochu is a Japanese spirit, which you can kind of think of as like, what if we took sake and distilled it, made it angrier. Now, there are plenty of US cities with significant Asian American populations, so why did I choose Chinatown specifically for Seattle? We've got an incredible Chinatown here in DC, which is actually where I got this Baijiu from. Well, a number of reasons. Number one, Seattle's Chinatown is quite literally just across the street from the Seahawks Stadium. Number two, Seattle is home to, as I mentioned, Wajimaya, which is an Asian supermarket chain with a specific focus on Japanese products. And 3, these 2 communities are just so integral to the social fabric of Seattle. Seattle's had a Chinese American population basically for as long as there's been a Seattle. And prior to World War II, Seattle had the 2nd largest Japanese American population on the West Coast. All right, now coming back to these liquors, starting with Baijiu. I know I said it's made from distilled fermented sorghum, but what does that actually mean? What does it taste like? Short answer, it depends. Much like China itself, Baijiu is not a monolith, and so it's really hard to just kind of give a singular description for what it tastes like, right? You can kind of think of this as like trying to describe to someone what whiskey tastes like, right? You can pick out some general similarities, but a bourbon is going to taste really different to a rye, both of which are worlds away from like a peated scotch. And that's not even considering things like price points or where they come from. But with all of that in mind, the main thing you're going to be looking at here is a clear spirit with an ABV somewhere between 35 and 60%, and some generally floral, herbal, somewhat fruity notes. However, like I said, this can vary quite drastically based on which Baijiu you have, and it's not uncommon for people to start with something like a Kaoliang wine and then immediately describe it as tasting like, jet fuel or paint thinner.
Cheers. It tastes like Tester's model paint.
So the specific one that I have here is a Ming River Baijiu. This is a Szechuan Baijiu, and is actually, in my opinion, probably the best starting point for people trying to get into Baijiu, because this one is specifically crafted to basically break into the Western market. That being said, the flavor profile of this is still likely to be unlike anything you've ever tasted before. The way I would describe it is the 2 strongest notes are guava and pink peppercorn, but this is specifically designed to be mixed into cocktails, so it'll be an excellent representative for our drink later on. Now, Shochu, which is our Japanese spirit, is also a pretty large umbrella category, as it can be made from a wide variety of grains and starches. The key unifier behind all of them, besides being Japanese, is the fact that they all use the same koji mold that's used in sake brewing to do their fermentation. Now, the shochu I have here is an otsuri mugi shochu, which means it is made from barley and is only distilled a single time, preserving more of those sort of characteristic flavors. These types of shochu are generally regarded as milder and easier to drink than those made with rice or sweet potatoes, and this specific one has an ABV of 35%. Now, I was tempted to include a whole history lesson on Uwajimaya here, but instead I will just say this. If you see one, go explore. It is a mecca. You will find something interesting or delicious there to make the trip worthwhile. I guarantee it. All right, so for the Cardinals, we have another corporate creation courtesy of Smirnoff. This time it is the Red Sea. This is a really simple mixed drink of just vodka, watermelon juice, and lime juice. Something you can just, toss together in a pitcher and then serve at a party. I can practically guarantee that that was the thought process behind this drink's creation. We need a drink that's red and that will be easy to make and, serve at parties. And then this is what they came up with. I am actually kind of interested, though, that they decided to use watermelon juice in this drink instead of doing something like a Shirley Temple, with that splash of grenadine to make it red. I am very glad that they chose watermelon juice, though, because I think it is going to blend far better with our spirits than grenadine would. All right, so a very simple spec for our drinks at the end of the day. We are going to do 1.5 ounces of our spirit. So I'm going to be making both of these, one with Baijiu and one with Shochu, so we can do a little taste test comparison at the end. 3 ounces of our watermelon juice. Surprisingly difficult to find just pure watermelon juice, but thankfully I was able to find some, and it is also incredibly easy to make. Honestly, if I was being smarter, that's probably what I would have just done, but I am lazy at the end of the day, so I had to hunt some down instead. And then finally, a little bit of acidity, we are going to do 1/2 ounce of lime juice. So obviously by volume, watermelon juice is going to dominate this drink, but it's got a pretty mild flavor, so I'm looking forward to seeing what the end result of this is. Shake all of those up. And strain that into our coupe glass. I knew I was playing with fire with the wash line on these. All right, and drink number 2. See a very pretty color on both of these. I will say I'm very happy with that. All right, and so we have our 2 variants on the Red Sea. I'm calling the one made with Baijiu the Red Guard, and the one made with Shochu the Red Gyarados. So let's... But feeling this one is going to be milder, so I will start with our Red Gyarados. I mean, it smells like watermelon. That is absolutely the note you get. Straight watermelon. Ooh. Okay. One other nice addition, using that watermelon juice instead of using like grenadine, right? Besides all the flavor differences, obviously, is that the watermelon juice has a texture to it because it is just that cold pressed watermelon. And so you get almost like if there was a crushed ice used to make this drink, you sort of get that like those little particulates coming across your tongue, which is quite a pleasant sensation actually. Beyond that, really not much. I mean, this is actually probably comparable to how the Red Sea tastes like, because this shochu is so mild. I will say, as a result, this is a really dangerous drink because this does just taste like sort of slightly diluted watermelon juice. Yeah, you can taste a little bit of that shochu in there. There's a little bit of those sort of like classic notes that you would associate with a sake. That sort of kind of grainy, not grainy as in like a texture way, but grainy as in that sort of like, you know, not quite bready, but similarly, somewhere between like a bread and like a rice. Yeah, but that's just lovely. I mean, that's, you know, that's a great sipper. Tastes like watermelon. Nothing offensive with it. The red guard, this is going to be interesting because this Baijiu has way more punch to it than this Shochu does. So if we are going to notice differences, this is the drink where we will notice them. So let's see. Okay, so before anything, you notice the difference in the nose right away. This one, all of those sorts of, especially that guava and sort of pink peppercorn type notes that I think are from the sorghum, those come off the nose right away. So it's still the watermelon there, but there's definitely you know, sort of accents to that watermelon of these like, oh, huh. Yeah, and then they come through in the drink. And that's really nice because that is like, they dance so well with the watermelon juice. And my one complaint with this Baijiu is that it can have a kind of somewhat acrid, I would say, mouthfeel when you just have it. Because, you know, it's a clear spirit, it's not going to have a lot of those sugars in it that you get with something like an aged rum or a whiskey. And so as a result, it can be pretty, you know, abrasive when you just have it straight. But mixed into this drink, you know, all that sugar from the watermelon juice and that, you know, little bit of acid from the lime juice, they cover up the sort of mouthfeel of it so well and just let those really unique little flavor notes sort of come through and add a little bit of character to this drink. Yeah, this one is definitely my preferred drink. Neither one is bad. They're both perfectly solid, but this is like a B, and this one's like a strong A-, you know? I still think you could add extra layers to this drink. It's pretty sort of one note right now, but it's like, this drink is, the red Gyarados is truly one note. The red guard is like 1.5 notes, because there are those little accents that get to sort of peek through once in a while. But, all right, 2 solid drinks, 2 teams competing. Which one will win? Find out in the simulation.
Now, I'm not sure why, but the Madden Sims this week have really been favoring the defenses. I'm not sure if it has to do with player rating adjustments or injuries or some other thing. There may not be much scoring, but at least we get plenty of sacks on both sides. That said, these games aren't completely devoid of big plays. Case in point, this 35-yard deep strike to Marvin Harrison Jr. to set the Cards up in scoring position. Despite making it to the 4-yard line, though, Seattle sends 7 men on the blitz and completely overwhelms the offensive line, backing up the Cards to the 11 and holding them to a field goal. On the following drive for the Seahawks, this back corner bomb from Darnold to Torrey Horton is broken up. Seattle ties the game up with a field goal. With 3 minutes left in the first half, Kyler attempts to take off scrambling for the first down, but is wrapped up from behind by Jaron Reed. Arizona settles for another 3 points. However, the defense forces a quick 3-and-out from Seattle, and with a minute left in the first half, Kyler drops back in the pocket, sets his feet, and finds Marvin Harrison Jr. outrunning the entire Seattle secondary en route to a 75-yard touchdown, making the score 13-3. With the pace of this game, you might assume that that'd be it for the half, but the Hawks march quickly into scoring position, hitting a 36-yarder to make this a one-score game, 13-6 at the half. Sadly for everybody who enjoys offensive football, that would be the last score of the game, as both defenses pitched a second-half shutout. Halfway through the fourth quarter, Sam Darnold takes off scrambling, and seeing 3 Cardinals converging on him, slides short of both the end zone and the first down. On the 5-yard line, only down 7, Seattle is unable to convert the 3rd and 4th down, turning the ball over. But wait, it's not over yet. The Seahawks get the ball back and make it all the way down to the 8-yard line. So of course, with 7 seconds left, no timeouts, needing a touchdown, the Madden AI throws a short curl to the tight end in the middle of the field, where he's promptly tackled and time expires. Arizona wins 13-6. Now, I know both of these teams have underrated defenses and kinda questionable offenses, but 13-6 is truly just a sad final score. This is a true toss-up of a game, though, and should prove to be a really interesting divisional matchup. Both of these quarterbacks were efficient and safe with the ball, but neither one was really blowing up the stat sheet. 248 passing yards is pretty typical of the Sam Darnold that we saw lighting it up in Minnesota last season, though he does seem to be getting off to a bit of a slower start in Seattle. As for Kyler, he's never been one to air it out a ton, so 198 yards is pretty standard there, but he threw for about 10 fewer passes than he usually does, so better yards per catch. It's no secret that Kyler can run, though, and he had a healthy scrambling performance this game, racking up 55 yards on 9 carries. As for Sam, 5 carries for 38 yards is definitely on the high end of what he's put on tape in the past. He typically averages closer to 10 yards per game. Now, a big part of why neither of these teams could score at all this game is because they absolutely could not run the damn ball. Kenneth Walker, my beloved, only 7 carries for 11 yards? I know he didn't have a great first game this season, but that's a new level of rough. His running mate, Zach Charbonnet, didn't have any better of a time, finishing at -3 yards on 2 carries. In their defense, Arizona's backs couldn't get anything going either, though funnily enough, it looks like they actually had a true committee approach going on for once. Trey Benson led the Cards in carries, but only managed a grand total of 1 yard on his 7 attempts. James Conner was only marginally more efficient, managing a whopping 7 yards on 4 carries. In the receiving game, lots of love being shown to the rookie tight end, Elijah Arroyo, 7 catches for 75 yards. Of course, nobody on Seattle's side of the ball hauled in a touchdown, so that's about as good as it's going to get. Kenneth Walker might not have been able to do anything on the ground, but they did at least still find ways to get him the ball, as he managed 44 yards on 7 receptions. I mean, the worst of Seattle's top receivers was Cooper Kupp, but considering how badly Madden slanders wide receiver ones, 3 catches for 38 yards is relatively healthy. Now, fitting the theme of the red guard from this game's cocktail, Kyler was making sure the ball was spread around evenly, with every Arizona ball catcher getting either 2 or 3 catches. 6 different targets, all within 1 catch of each other. Of those targeted, Marv was obviously the master of efficiency, with his 2 catches going for a combined 110 yards and 1 touchdown, the only one of the game. Despite the Monte Carlo sim predicting much healthier offenses for both of these teams, both quarterbacks still saw their stats deflated, as the Monte Carlo sim just loves running backs that much. James Conner and K9 both leading the way on their respective teams, with nice supporting performances from Trey Benson and Zach Charbonnet. Perhaps the biggest difference receiving-wise is which tight end the sim favored. Obviously, Arroyo had a very nice game in Madden, but in the Monte Carlo sim, it's all Trey McBride, averaging a bit over 6 carries for around 54 yards. Hell, the Monte Carlo sim also kind of agrees with what I was saying earlier about Kupp's performance being typical, as it has him at just under 5 catches for 40 yards. The addition of an actually functional running game slightly bumps up the score for this game, with the most common outcome being a 14-14 tie between these two teams. However, when you account for all of the other possible outcomes, the simulation tilts slightly in Seattle's favor, settling on a 17-15 Seahawks victory. Do you agree with the simulations, or do you envision a different future? I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts down in the comments. As a reminder, our drinks for this matchup are the mild and refreshing Red Gyarados and Red Guard. If you decide to make them, please let me know what you think, and I'd love to hear your suggestions for what drink should be your team's representative. Stay curious, stay thirsty, and I'll see you in the next one.